The late afternoon sun sprawled across the countryside in thick orange ribbons, setting the fields ablaze in warm color. Dust lifted in soft spirals behind a small convoy that cut across the rural highway, 3 black SUVs in front, a custom livestock carrier in the middle, and finally, a gleaming modified pickup truck bringing up the rear. Every vehicle carried the unmistakable crest of Estancia Santa Aurora, a stylized golden sun rising behind the silhouette of a bull. Inside the custom pickup, Isabel Duarte watched the road through the panoramic windshield. Light glinted off her dark hair, tied neatly behind her head, and illuminated the calm determination in her eyes. Her wheelchair was anchored securely to the interior platform, a mechanical support adjusting minutely to her posture. Her assistant, Julia, sat beside her with a tablet on her lap. "The dealership confirmed the units are ready for inspection," she said, scrolling. "The specs for the heavy haul models look promising. If everything checks out, we can finalize contracts by Friday." Isabel nodded, expression steady. "Good. I want to increase our long-haul capacity by at least 15% before export season peaks." Even the way she said it carried authority. Not loud, not imposing, just inevitable. A woman who planned, decided, executed. As they neared Transroda Kamenhoys, the largest truck dealership in the region, she allowed herself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. Renewing the fleet was a yearly ritual, part logistical necessity, part personal pride. The transport division of Santa Aurora was one of the most efficient in the hemisphere, and these trucks were part of her empire's bloodstream. The convoy slowed. The dealership's main building came into view, a long facade of glass panels reflecting the sky, with rows upon rows of new trucks lined up like soldiers awaiting command. The SUVs spread out first, security personnel stepping out to assess the perimeter discreetly. The livestock carrier parked alongside a loading area, its driver hopping down to adjust a tarp. Customers and employees craned their necks to see the unusual procession. Sleek engines, polished logos, a quiet, unmistakable aura of wealth and purpose. And then, finally, the custom pickup rolled to a halt at the entrance. A hydraulic ramp descended smoothly. An employee near the doorway muttered, Who exactly is that?" Julia stepped down first, surveying the area briefly, then leaned back inside the truck. "Ready?" she asked. "As always," Isabel replied. The platform lowered, her wheelchair emerging with a soft hum. The dealership's chatter died down instantly. People stared, but not out of pity, nor even recognition. They stared because Isabel carried herself with the calm, grounded dignity of someone who never apologized for existing. She crossed the threshold of the building, wheels gliding over polished tiles. Her posture was controlled, her gaze level, her presence quietly commanding. But not everyone was receptive. From across the showroom, a man watched her arrival with a furrowed brow and a curled lip. Marcelo, the dealership manager, tall and immaculately dressed, tapped his pen irritably against a clipboard. His annoyance was visible even from afar, as though Isabel's mere presence inconvenienced him. He leaned toward a salesman next to him. "What is this, a parade?" he muttered. The salesman shrugged nervously. "She looks important." Marcelo snorted. "Important? Please, someone looking for attention, more like." Isabel didn't hear him, nor did she need to. Years of navigating the world in a wheelchair had given her an instinct for recognizing contempt before the first word was spoken. But she pushed forward, undeterred. The reception desk came into view. The receptionist straightened as Isabel approached, clearly uncertain how to behave, but trying her best to appear professional. "Good afternoon," Isabel said, her voice clear, warm, unwavering. "I'm here to review the quotations for a full fleet replacement. 27 units. The receptionist blinked, startled by the number. She opened her mouth to respond, and Marcelo stepped in front of her. The light caught the polished buckle of his belt, the sleek gel holding his hair in place, the artificial confidence in his posture. He didn't smile. He didn't greet her. He simply looked down at her wheelchair, and the corners of his mouth tightened into something that wasn't quite a smirk, but wasn't far from it. In that moment, the energy of the room shifted. Julia felt it immediately, her fingers clenched around her tablet, Isabel felt it too, though she remained perfectly composed. Marcelo tapped the clipboard with feigned sympathy. "This section is for major buyers only, senora," he said slowly, as if explaining instructions to a child. "Maybe try the service area in the back. The staff can help with smaller, more accessible needs." The word accessible dripped with condescension. Julia's eyes widened in disbelief. Isabel's expression remained neutral. Too neutral. The chapter's conflict had arrived, and it had come in the shape of a man who had no idea he had just crossed the wealthiest woman in the country. The air inside the dealership grew strangely dense, as if the humming fluorescence above them had dipped into a lower, more uncomfortable pitch. Customers who had been browsing engines and spec sheets slowed their movements. Salesmen subtly drifted closer, drawn by the tension radiating from Marcelo's stance. Isabel's eyes lifted to meet his. They were calm, too calm, like the still surface of water right before a storm. "Is there someone else I can speak with?" she asked, voice level. Marcelo tilted his head, pretending not to understand the question. "I'm the manager. You're already speaking to the highest authority you're going to get today." Julia inhaled sharply, an instinctive protest forming, but Isabel flicked her eyes to silence her. She preferred dignity over confrontation, at least at first. "I am here for the fleet replacement quotations," Isabel repeated. 27 trucks, long-haul and refrigerated units. My team sent documents ahead." Instead of answering, Marcelo laughed. Not loudly, not rudely. Worse, dismissively. "That's cute," he said. "Really, but this is not a place for unrealistic requests." He made a vague gesture toward her wheelchair as if it explained everything. A salesman standing behind him mouthed, "Meu Deus," eyes widening in disbelief. Isabel kept her breathing steady. Her father had once taught her that silence could be a weapon, sharper than any blade. "Unrealistic?" she asked. "Well," Marcelo continued, leaning forward on the reception desk as if settling in for a lecture, "these trucks aren't toys. They cost more than what most people here will make in a decade. And they're complicated, heavy-duty, requires serious buyers." He flashed a pitying smile. "I'm sure you mean well, senora, but maybe a smaller dealership would be easier for someone in your condition." This time the murmur from the staff and customers was audible. Julia stepped forward, unable to contain herself. "You have no idea who you're talking to." Marcelo lifted a hand without looking at her. "Please, I'm trying to help you avoid embarrassment." He glanced around, raising his voice just enough for nearby customers to hear. "We get all sorts of walk-ins, people who think they can buy something because they saw a video online. But these trucks are serious investments, and if you can't even get around on your own, how are you going to manage a full fleet?" The comment landed like a slap. Even those who didn't know Isabel personally flinched, as if the cruelty had ricocheted through the room. For a full second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Isabel's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in an almost imperceptible reflex of pain. But when she finally spoke, her voice was quiet enough that only those nearest could hear. "I see," she said. That was all. 2 small, perfectly controlled words, but Marcelo interpreted them as victory. His face brightened with smug satisfaction. "Now, if you'll excuse me," he said, straightening his tie. "I have actual clients to attend to." He turned away without waiting for a response. Julia trembled with fury. "Isa, we should leave, or call someone, or—" "No." Isabel's voice was soft but firm. "We'll finish what we came for." She pivoted her wheelchair slightly, scanning the room until she found a young salesman watching her with conflicted eyes, embarrassed by his boss, yet too powerless to intervene. "Can you show me the specs on the long-haul beef transport units?" Isabel asked him gently. The young man froze, torn between decency and fear. Before he could speak, Marcelo's voice boomed across the showroom. "Pedro, don't waste your time. I told you, this isn't a serious customer." Laughter, awkward, forced, ripples from 2 junior employees trying to side with their boss. Isabel didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shrink back. Instead, she looked directly into Marcelo's eyes as he strutted back toward his glass-walled office, basking in his illusion of superiority. Her voice was steady as steel when she said, "Thank you for your honesty, Marcelo. It tells me everything I need to know." Marcelo waved her off dismissively, already half inside his office. But several employees exchanged worried glances. Something in the air had shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, just subtly enough to raise the hairs at the back of the neck. Because despite the humiliation, despite Marcelo's arrogance, despite the momentary sting of injustice, Isabel Duarte had not looked defeated. She had looked patient. The kind of patience that comes from knowing exactly who you are, and from knowing exactly what's coming next. The glass door to Marcelo's office swung shut behind him with a smug thud, leaving the echo of humiliation hanging in the showroom like a sour smell. Isabel sat still, her fingers resting lightly on the armrest of her wheelchair, her expression unreadable. Julia stepped closer. "Isa, please, let's just go. This place doesn't deserve your time." Isabel didn't answer. Instead, she turned slightly, just enough to take in the room. The salesman who had witnessed Marcelo's behavior avoided her gaze, some shifting uncomfortably, others pretending to check paperwork that didn't exist. She wasn't angry. She was calculating. "I want to wait," Isabel finally said softly. "Just a moment." Julia frowned but didn't argue. She knew that tone, never loud, but absolute. When Isabel chose patience over confrontation, it meant she was thinking 3 steps ahead, and Isabel Duarte did not think small. 2 minutes later, a low rumble approached from the road. Multiple engines, synced, deliberate. The dealership windows vibrated faintly as a procession of black sedans pulled into the entrance, polished as obsidian and unmistakably governmental. Customers turned. Employees stiffened. Someone whispered, "What is happening?" The first sedan parked, then the second, then a van marked with the emblem of Red Nacional, the country's largest news network. A cameraman jumped out before the vehicle even came to a complete stop. The security guards at the dealership, usually relaxed, usually bored, straightened as if a military general had arrived. Within seconds, the entrance filled with figures in tailored suits, carrying briefcases, tablets, and folders stamped with official seals. Leading them was Dr. Nestor Aquino, president of the National Beef Exporters Association, one of the most influential business organizations in the country. Not a man one ignored, not a man one made wait. He strode forward, expression urgent. "Where is Isabel Duarte?" he demanded. One of the salesmen pointed, slowly, almost reverently, toward the quiet woman in the wheelchair. Dr. Nestor's shoulders dropped with relief. "Ah, thank God. Senora Duarte. Disculpe the delay." Marcelo, hearing the commotion, burst out of his office, irritation already forming on his face. "What's with the circus out?" He froze. He stared at Dr. Nestor, then at the news crew. Then at the bank, officials stepping out of a third vehicle with clipboards bearing the logo of Banco Continental, the largest agribusiness lender in the nation. Finally, he looked at Isabel. A sickly pale color washed over his skin. "Ms. Duarte?" he croaked, his throat going dry. Isabel did not turn her head. She waited until Nestor reached her and shook her hand gently, respectfully. "Senora Duarte," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "you honor us. We came as soon as we received your message. You're ready for the annual renewal negotiations." Marcelo blinked. "Annual renewal?" "Of course," Nestor continued. 27 units, correct? You are, after all, our most significant exporter, the biggest beef supplier in the Southern Hemisphere." He looked around, smiling with pride. "And the wealthiest woman in the country." Not a whisper, not a murmur, a vacuum. The entire dealership dissolved into stunned silence. Marcelo's lips trembled. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Sweat gathered along his hairline, a stark contrast to the perfect confidence he had flaunted minutes earlier. The bank representatives approached next. "Senora Duarte, we've brought the revised financing packages you requested," one said. "Your fleet's pre-approval is, as always, guaranteed." Then the TV anchor approached Isabel. "Ms. Duarte, if you're willing, we'd like to capture your arrival." It is not every day the country's largest beef exporter renews their entire transport fleet. Marcelo felt the world tilt. He clung to the edge of his office door as if reality itself were slipping from his grasp. Finally, Isabel turned her head, slowly, deliberately, until her eyes met his. In that single glance, Marcelo understood everything. He hadn't just insulted a potential client. He had humiliated and underestimated the most powerful woman his dealership would ever see. His breath hitched. "Ms. Duarte," he stammered. I didn't realize if I had known." Isabel spoke softly, cutting through his panic like a clean blade. "You didn't need to know who I am, Marcelo. You only needed to know how to treat another human being." Everything stopped. Marcelo felt the weight of every set of eyes on him. Shame crawled across his face like fire. And before he could muster another plea, Dr. Nestor turned to the dealership staff. "Who is the manager here?" he asked. A trembling finger pointed at Marcelo. Nestor's jaw tightened. "Oh," he said crisply. "Then we have a problem." Marcelo's legs nearly gave out, and Isabel, calm as ever, sat quietly, watching the consequences begin to unfold. She had not raised her voice. She had not needed to. Power, when real, didn't scream. It whispered, and everyone listened. The atmosphere inside the dealership had transformed. Where humiliation and condescension had filled the air minutes earlier, now there was silence. Shocked, suffocating silence. One could almost hear the heartbeat of the building as everyone watched Marcelo, the once arrogant manager, unravel. Isabel's wheelchair faced him like a throne of quiet judgment. Dr. Nestor stepped closer, voice firm. "Marcelo, I assume you have an explanation for why you turned away Isabel Duarte, our largest industry leader, when she came here to conduct a multi-million real business negotiation." Marcelo swallowed hard, eyes darting between the cameras, the executives, the stunned staff, and finally Isabel. "I didn't turn her away," he lied desperately. "It was a misunderstanding. I was trying to help." Isabel raised a hand very slightly, barely a gesture, yet enough to stop him mid-sentence. "Marcelo," she said, her voice low, calm, almost gentle. That tone cut deeper than shouting ever could. "You weren't trying to help me. You were trying to diminish me." A ripple of murmurs passed through the staff, some nodding subtly. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. Marcelo's face blanched. "Ms. Duarte, please, if I had known who you were." "That," Isabel said, interrupting, "is precisely the problem." Her gaze held his like a steel pin. "You needed to know who I am before deciding whether to respect me." She let the words sink in. A cameraman zoomed in, sensing the gravity of the moment. "In my business," Isabel continued, "I negotiate with ranchers who have nothing but a worn-out hat and acres of hope. I negotiate with scientists, distributors, warehouse workers, international CEOs, and I treat all of them the same." Her tone sharpened, not loud, but edged with iron. "I don't measure people by their posture, their clothes, or their mobility. But you," she paused, "you measured me by my wheelchair." Marcelo's knees trembled visibly. A nearby salesman looked away, ashamed on his behalf. Julia folded her arms, furious, protective, proud. Dr. Nestor nodded gravely. "She deserves better than this, Marcelo. Anyone does." And then another voice entered the scene. One the entire dealership recognized immediately. The dealership owner, a tall, gray-haired man in an expensive navy suit, rushed in from the service wing, clearly summoned by frantic calls. "Good heavens, Ms. Duarte," he said, breathless. "If I had known you were coming, I would have personally—" Isabel stopped him with a soft smile. "I did not need personal reception," she said. "I only needed basic human decency." The owner's jaw flexed. He exhaled slowly, turning to Marcelo, his expression hardening. "What did you do?" Marcelo stammered incoherently. "Sir, I just—" The owner's voice cracked like a whip. "Enough." He faced Isabel with sincere remorse. "Señora Duarte, please allow me to apologize on behalf of this company. This behavior is unacceptable. We hold ourselves to higher standards. Isabel nodded once, accepting the apology but not retracting the truth. What happens now, she said calmly, is entirely up to you. The owner didn't hesitate. Marcelo, he said quietly but firmly, you are dismissed. Gasps filled the room. Marcelo's eyes bulged with panic. Sir, please, I've worked here for 10 years. I didn't mean... You meant every word, the owner said, stepping back, and now you can experience the consequences. Security approached, not forcibly, but unmistakably, and Marcelo stepped back in horror. He looked at Isabel desperately. Ms. Duarte, please, I'm sorry. I swear I'm sorry. Isabel studied him. Her expression held no cruelty, just clarity. I believe you are sorry, she said softly, but not for what you did, only for who you did it to. Those words shattered what was left of his pride. He lowered his head, unable to speak, and allowed security to escort him away. As the door closed behind him, Isabel turned toward the owner. I will take my business elsewhere, she said, not angry, but resolute. Not out of vengeance, but out of principle. I invest in companies that treat people with dignity. The owner bowed his head. I understand, and I am deeply sorry. The TV anchor whispered to her producer, powerful quote, make sure that's in the final cut. Then, in a shift that stunned even the staff, Isabel addressed the cameras. You may use this footage, she said. Let this moment remind others that prejudice still exists, and that it can cost far more than a contract. Reporters scribbled furiously. The assembled executives nodded, and Julia, standing behind Isabel, felt goosebumps rise across her skin. Because Isabel Duarte had not merely defended herself, she had changed the room, without rage, without insults, without raising her voice, simply with truth, simply with dignity, simply by being who she was. The richest woman in the country, yes, but also the most commanding, the most unshakable, the most impossible to diminish. And the reckoning was complete. The morning sun crept over the rolling hills of Estancia Santa Aurora, painting the sky in shades of apricot and rose. Mist clung to the grass in thin, delicate veils. The land seemed to breathe, vast, serene, alive. It was a place that looked like it belonged to no one and everyone, yet it answered to a single name, Isabel Duarte. Dozens of newly purchased trucks, sleek, polished, and custom-fitted, were lined up in a pristine row behind her. Their chrome surfaces reflected the dawn like mirrors. Not one bore the logo of Transrhoda Kamenhoys. Reporters gathered across a small stage set up in front of the ranch's central headquarters. Camera tripods clicked into place. Microphones adjusted. The buzz of anticipation filled the crisp morning air. Julia rolled Isabel forward, centering her in front of the podium. The reporters quieted instantly. To the public, Isabel was a titan, an agricultural visionary, a logistics mastermind, a business phenomenon. But here, bathed in the warm light of her own land, she looked simply at home. A reporter from Jornal Nacional raised her hand. Ms. Duarte, the country was shocked by what happened at the dealership yesterday. Many are asking why you chose to expose the situation instead of handling it privately. Isabel's eyes drifted momentarily to the horizon, the endless stretch of pasture land where thousands of cattle grazed peacefully. When she spoke, her voice was confident yet soft, like the sound of a person who had weathered storms and no longer feared the rain. I didn't expose anything, she said. I revealed what was already there. Cameras clicked rapidly. Prejudice thrives in silence, she continued. It grows in the spaces where people assume no one will challenge it. If that dealership manager treated me that way, someone with status, wealth, visibility, what happens to the people who can't defend themselves? To the woman buying her first used truck? To the man looking for a fair price? To the girl too afraid to speak up? A heavy pause filled the air. Isabel's voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It simply carried. I didn't correct Marcelo for myself. I did it for the next person who walks through those doors. The crowd murmured with admiration. Even the seasoned reporters leaned forward, sensing the sincerity woven through her words. Another journalist stepped up. What now for your fleet operations? Has this incident affected your logistics planning? Isabel smiled, a small, confident curve of the lips. It improved them. Behind her, truck engines rumbled to life one by one, as if on cue. The rows of new vehicles shone, models from a different dealership that prided itself on accessibility training, customer-first philosophy, and the kind of service that didn't need to know a name to show respect. I gave my business to a company that understands something very simple, Isabel said. Dignity is not a special request. It's a starting point. Julia's eyes shimmered with pride. She had seen Isabel battle for years, against injury, against exclusion, against the assumptions people made about her body. Yet the woman before her was unbroken, unwavering, unstoppable. Another reporter asked, Ms. Duarte, people online are calling you a symbol of resilience. How do you feel about that? Isabel took a breath. Her gaze softened. Resilience, she said, is not a talent. It's a choice I make every day. Her voice carried warmth, real warmth. I am not strong because I'm wealthy. I am not strong because I'm successful. I am strong because I wake up each morning and decide to keep going. And anyone can do that. The ranch workers listening nearby, mechanics, drivers, veterinarians, nodded with quiet admiration. To them, she wasn't just a legend. She was their leader, their inspiration, their Isabel. A final reporter raised his hand timidly. If Marcelo were watching this right now, what would you say to him? Isabel took a long moment before answering. I would say this, she began. I don't want him destroyed. I don't want him humiliated. I want him changed. She turned slightly, her wheelchair angled toward the fields as the sun rose fully above the horizon. I hope he learns that every person deserves respect, not because of who they are, but because of who he chooses to be. Silence, then applause, soft at first, then swelling into something warm and genuine. Isabel nodded, acknowledging them all, then gave a gentle signal to her logistics team. Let's begin the new season, she said. Engines roared. Drivers climbed into cabs. The first trucks rolled out of the ranch gates, each one a symbol, not just of commerce, but of progress. As the convoy disappeared down the road, Isabel remained still for a moment, letting the breeze brush her face. Julia leaned close. You did it, she whispered. Again. Isabel smiled. The smile of someone who had faced the worst and turned it into something better. No, she said. We did. And as the sun climbed higher over Estancia Santa Aurora, Isabel Duarte, the richest woman in the country, the most powerful rancher in the hemisphere, the woman the world called unshakable, felt something she had earned 1,000 times over. Peace. Months had passed since the incident at Transroda Kamenhoys, yet its echoes lingered in boardrooms, dealerships, and industry forums across the country. News clips of Isabel's quiet confrontation, paired with her words on dignity and respect, had gone viral, not as a fleeting scandal but as a lesson in leadership, resilience, and moral courage. At Estancia Santa Aurora, the ranch had returned to its usual rhythm. Cattle grazed lazily under the afternoon sun, workers moved between barns and trucks with practiced ease, and the new fleet operated like a well-oiled orchestra. Isabel wheeled herself along the main driveway, her hands resting lightly on the controls of her wheelchair, observing the activity with the same calm authority that had defined her entire life. Her assistant, Julia, walked beside her, holding a tablet displaying logistics schedules, shipment plans, and projections. But neither of them spoke immediately. They simply watched the world move around them, efficient, alive, and thriving. Finally, Isabel broke the silence. Change doesn't happen in a day, she said, her tone quiet but certain. It happens in the moments you refuse to accept the wrong as permanent. Julia nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Even Marcelo? She asked lightly, though the question was loaded. Isabel smiled faintly, but there was no malice in it. Even him, she said. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to show what the world could be like if people chose respect over pride, dignity over prejudice. Her words were more than philosophy, they were practice. Transroda, once arrogant and dismissive, had implemented new training programs, accessibility protocols, and sensitivity initiatives after losing her business. The ripple of change was slow, but it was real. Beyond the business world, Isabel's story inspired young women in agriculture, entrepreneurs in logistics, and countless individuals who faced prejudice in their daily lives. Schools invited her to speak on leadership. Nonprofits reached out for guidance on inclusive practices. She had turned a single moment of humiliation into a movement of subtle but profound influence. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the ranch in gold and amber, Isabel looked toward the line of trucks returning from the day's deliveries. Engines hummed softly. Dust spiraled in lazy patterns across the fields. She allowed herself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. "Do you ever get tired of being the one who has to lead all the time?" Julia asked, half joking, half curious. Isabel turned her gaze toward the horizon, letting the breeze lift her hair. "Not when the work matters," she said. "The world will always challenge you. The question isn't whether you'll face it, it's whether you'll rise above it, or let it define you." Julia smiled, sensing the calm conviction that came from someone who had faced not just business rivals, but the deepest prejudices of the human heart, and had prevailed. The ranch grew quiet again, save for the distant lowing of cattle and the rhythmic hum of diesel engines. Isabel's eyes softened as she took in the scene, her empire, her people, her life, all shaped not merely by wealth, but by resilience, intelligence, and unwavering dignity. And in that quiet, golden evening light, it was clear. Isabel Duarte had not only survived humiliation, she had transformed it into legacy. No one would ever forget her. Not Marcelo, not the industry, not the world. Because true power is not measured in money or fleets of trucks. It is measured in courage, in grace, in the ability to rise above and leave the world better than you found it. And Isabel Duarte had done just that. The ranch exhaled with her. The trucks roared on. And the woman in the wheelchair, richest and most unstoppable in the country, smiled, knowing the world had changed, quietly but irrevocably, because she refused to bow.